Good day to you all. I'm Daniel Joseph, and in this video I'm going to bring forth explanation for the facts of how animals reached remote islands, especially volcanic islands, even though they were not habitats of those islands and lack capability to cross wide oceans to reach there. In 1931, a young naturalist Darwin undertook a sea voyage in the Beagle ship to study nature. When he reached the Galapagos Island, which is 1,000 kilometers away from the South American continents, he saw giant tortoises and slow-moving animal. Similarly, he also saw lizards called as iguanas. He wondered how these animals crossed the wide oceans to reach these islands. It is generally believed that these animals would have accidentally reached these islands by means of floating vegetation, surviving many days without food and water. But in a research, scientist G.Ponmudi found that 20 million years ago, the sea level was 2 kilometers lower than the present level. It should be noted that the present average sea depth is 4 kilometers, which is caused by water seeping from deep earth. Due to the extreme low sea level, forested land connection existed between the continents and the islands, especially volcanic islands, through which animal migration took place. Stay glued as I, Daniel Joseph, am going to narrate the facts and evidences pointed out by scientist G.Ponmudi for his discovery. And this is considered as a deadly discovery because the seeping water comes from deep earth due to the cooling of magma, and the earth consists of 80% of magma. The seeping of water is a continuous process, due to which the rising of sea level is also a continuous process, which will definitely lead to the submergence of all land and mountains on which plants, animals and we live. 20 million years ago, the sea level had been 2 kilometers lower than the present level and has risen up later. Based on the bone fossils of a dwarf species of hippopotamus, it has been found out that 20 million years ago, the sea level was 2 kilometers low. The pygmy hippopotamus is a species which evolved in the African continent. Being the third largest animal next to elephant and rhinoceros, the animal cannot float or swim on the surface of water. Recently, bone fossils of 3 species of pygmy hippopotami have been discovered on the island of Madagascar, situated at the distance 400 kilometers from the African continent. It was also discovered that these animals were weighing 400 kilograms. Based on his finding, the zoologists believe that these pygmy hippos accidentally landed on the island of Madagascar thrice by clinging onto the branches of trees which floated from the African continent. At the same time, bone fossils of different species of pygmy hippopotami have been discovered in the island of Sicily, Crete, Malta and Cyprus, situated in the Mediterranean Sea. Particularly, it is believed that the dwarf species of hippopotami, which inhabited the islands of the Mediterranean Sea, was only the subspecies of a full-sized species of hippopotamus called Hippopotamus antiques, which lived in the European continents. It is explained that the full-size hippos which reached the islands of the Mediterranean Sea by clinging to the floating trees shrunk through the process of insular dwarfism due to the limited food environment in the islands. Or else, at least one pregnant female hippo must have reached the islands, and after the birth of 2 calves, this species might have thrived. But the hippos usually give birth to only 1 calf. Very rarely, hippos have given birth to twin calves. It is a baseless theory that the hippos which accidentally arrived at the 4 islands of Sicily, Crete, Malta and Cyprus, situated in the Mediterranean Sea, by clinging to the floating tree branches, had unnaturally given birth to twin calves in each of these islands. It is meaningless to state that the hippos which accidentally arrived from African continent thrice by clinging to the floating tree branches had unnaturally given birth to twin calves every time. To be precise, the hippos could not have arrived accidentally at the 4 islands situated in the Mediterranean Sea 4 times from the European continent and arrived at the island of Madagascar thrice from the African continent by clinging to the tree branches floating in the sea. After arriving there in such a way, it is beyond one's imagination that hippos could unnaturally give birth to twin calves all the 7 times. Hence the fact that the bone fossils of different species of pygmy hippos have been discovered in the 4 islands of Sicily, Crete, Malta and Cyprus has been proved with evidence that 20 million years ago the sea level was 2 kilometers low and there was a land link between the continents and the islands. How did earthworms reach the island? From Galapagos Island, Darwin next reached island in Tahiti, which is in the central part of Pacific Ocean. Darwin learnt that on Tahiti lived rare species of earthworms which were not found on any other part of the world. Darwin stated as follows in his book: "Earthworms are present in large numbers on many isolated islands and on the Iceland. It has been found that they are also spotted on West Indies Islands, St. Helena, Madagascar, New Caledonia and Tahiti. Researchers have already explained about the earthworms found on Kerguelen Island. Darwin had stated that he had seen earthworms on island of Falkland. Unlike millipedes, earthworms do not have legs. Hence, earthworms cannot climb on trees or plants or creepers like the millipedes do. Similarly, the mucus secreted by earthworms is not sticky like the mucus of snails. So earthworms could not have reached the islands by getting stuck to the leaves or dry leaves, which can glide along with wind. It should be noted that earthworms are living things that breathe with their skin. When the air in between soil particles is attracted by the slimy secretion from the body of the earthworm, the oxygen in the air penetrates the skin and gets mixed with its blood. Similarly, the carbon dioxide in earthworm's blood is eliminated through skin and mixes with air outside and breathing takes place. If the earthworm remains in the air for a long time, the moisture on its body will dry up and it cannot breathe. Similarly, the earthworm's body dries up in sunlight, so it cannot survive. Hence, the earthworms come above the soil only in the evening and night. During rains also, earthworms come above the soil. The moisture on the earthworm's body will be intact in the evening, night and during rain. Hence, the earthworms could not have traveled on floating plants and branches of trees for many days and reached those islands. The earthworms could not have survived the sun and the wind for many days and reached those islands. So the presence of rare species of earthworms in Tahiti, which are not found in any other part of the world, shows that thousands of years ago the level of the ocean had been thousands of feet lower than what it is at present and had provided a link between the continents and islands. Apart from this, earthworms and their eggs are capable of absorbing salt in seawater. If such a thing happened, the earthworms would die. Based on this, Dr. Frank E. Bedard, who discovered many species of earthworms, had stated in his book, "The opinion that earthworms would have traveled on floating plants and reached the islands cannot be accepted." Surrounding the continent of Antarctica, each of the volcanic islands, normally Falkland and Kerguelen, St. Georgia, Crozet, Macquarie, Campbell and Auckland, have their own rare species of earthworms which can only be seen in each of these islands. How could the earthworms, which cannot migrate along with the wind or float along with floating plants, have reached the different volcanic islands found many hundreds of kilometers apart from surrounding the continents of Antarctica? Many thousands of years ago, when the level of the sea was thousands of feet lower, there should have been a link between the continents and the present-day islands, which were once volcanoes, and the earthworms would have migrated to different islands through that land link. A type of earthworm known as Microscolex, which is a native of the continent of South America, is found on different volcanic islands surrounding the continent of Antarctica. So, the presence of earthworm known as Microscolex on these islands proves that many thousands of years ago there should have been a land link between the continent of South America and the different volcanic islands surrounding it. The submerged continent. On the extreme southern end of the Indian Ocean, near the continent of Antarctica, is the island of Kerguelen, on which a rare variety of earthworms called Microscolex kergueliensis are found. For a long time, it has been a puzzle as to how the earthworms would have reached the volcanic island Kerguelen, which is situated in the center of a rough sea. At the same time, American researchers started to probe when the volcanic island Kerguelen came into existence. The island of Kerguelen is a volcano which is located on a flat plateau at the depth of 2 kilometers below the sea level. Researchers collected rocks formed by molten rock materials which had oozed out from the central portion of undersea plateau, which is known as the Kerguelen Plateau, and conducted a study. Then it came to light that those rocks had been formed 90 million years ago. In addition, the researchers also discovered in those submerged volcanic rocks the fossils of burnt part of trees, seeds and pollen grains. Based on these findings, Dr. Mike Coffin of the University of Texas, also the head of research team, stated that 90 million years ago, this undersea plateau had been an island above the sea level. So it has been proved by fossils of trees from under the sea Kerguelen Plateau that 90 million years ago, the level of sea had been 2 kilometers lower than as is present. So, the presence of South American earthworm, known as microscolex, on the volcanic island of Kerguelen, formed from under the sea Kerguelen Plateau, 2 kilometers above sea level, also goes to prove this. Hence, as the sea level had been 2 kilometers lower, the earthworms had migrated from the land of South America to Kerguelen volcanic region. It is possible for earthworms which live in the soil to migrate from one place to another along the land. Hence, by the presence of the South American earthworms on the volcanic islands of Kerguelen and the fossils of trees from the central part of undersea Kerguelen Plateau, which is submerged 2 kilometers below the sea level, it has been proved beyond doubt that the sea level had been 2 kilometers lower 90 million years ago. The giant tortoises and iguanas spotted by Charles Darwin in Falkland and the Galapagos Islands serve as the best evidence for stating that the earth is sinking. The animals found on the islands clearly show us that thousands of years ago the sea was thousands of feet lower and has risen up to the level that we find now. In the year 1831, Charles Darwin began his journey of research in HMS Beagle, a ship fitted with sails. He first researched the island Falkland, which was 400 kilometers away from South America. There, on the island, he found foxes which had wolf-like faces. Though those foxes had not seen people before, they were not afraid of Charles Darwin or the people who accompanied him, and were casually roaming about here and there on the island. At that time, Darwin wondered how these animals which lived on land could have reached the deserted island. Next, Darwin landed on Galapagos Island, which was situated 1,000 kilometers away from South America. To state specifically, Galapagos Islands are nothing but the summit of volcanoes found at the depth of 10,000 feet in the Pacific Ocean. In addition, the giant tortoises found on Galapagos Islands are only capable of moving very slowly. Galapagos Islands consist of about 15 large and small islands. The largest tortoises of the world are found on Galapagos Islands. There are 14 species of Galapagos tortoises known as Geochilin nigra. The body structure and the shape of the shell in each type of tortoise found in different islands are different from each other. Specifically stating, the giant tortoises found on Galapagos Islands are herbivorous in nature and feed only on plants. Moreover, the Isabella Island and Santa Cruz Island found in the Galapagos Island are not only large islands but also contain abundant moisture and hence are green with vegetation. As plant food is available at lower level from the ground level, the neck and legs of tortoises living on these islands are short. Moreover, the shells of tortoises found on Isabella Island and Santa Cruz Island appear like inverted large utensils or a tent. Moreover, the tortoises which on these islands weigh 290 kilos and appear like moving boulders. These tortoises will not be able to float in the sea even for a moment. Darwin tried to lift one of these tortoises, but he was unable to even move the giant tortoise. Hence, he wondered how these tortoises could have reached the island found in the center of the sea. The islands Espanola and Pinta of the Galapagos Islands are seen to be very dry islands. Cacti, which grow as high as trees, are found on these islands. A plant found is available at higher level from the ground level. The neck and legs of the tortoises living on these islands are longer than those found on the other islands. Though the Galapagos Islands are seen to be very close to each other, moving from one island to another is impossible. but the DNA testing showed that tortoises of Galapagos Islands are the descendants of small structured Geochelon nigra chilensis species found in the continent of South America. Moreover, it has been discovered that the tortoises of Galapagos Islands and South America are the descendant of common species which lived 6 million or 10 million years ago. Moreover, researchers believe that the tortoises which reached these islands along with huge branches of trees which were floating for about 2 weeks and initially washed ashore had abundant food available. As there were no predators, researchers believe that by feeding on abundant food available, the tortoises evolved into large-sized species. It should be noted that it is impossible for the tortoises of Galapagos Islands to move from one island to another. Moreover, the tortoises found on one island reproduce only with the species found on that particular island, which led to the sighting of different species of tortoises on different islands. When it is impossible for tortoises to even go to the next island, which is close by, definitely it would not have been possible for the tortoises to travel thousands of kilometers on the branches of trees for 2 weeks and reach here. Researchers state that as tortoises' body consists of abundant fat and water, and hence they could have lived without food and water for 2 weeks during their sea voyage. But on the same Galapagos group of islands, on Santa Cruz Island, a special type of rat called Neisserizomys darwini also lives. Researchers believe that the ancestors of the rat Neisserizomys darwini would have reached Galapagos Islands from the continent of South America by sea. Researchers explain that as tortoises' body consists of abundant fat and water, they could have lived without food and water for 2 weeks during their sea voyage. But how the rats, which are very small animals, could survive without food and water for 2 weeks during their sea voyage? Darwin was surprised to see land snails on many islands. As these snails were not able to cross the sea area, he tried his level best to find out how they could have gone to so many islands. Iguanas of Galapagos Islands. The lizard-like animals known as iguanas, which can grow up to 6 feet in length, are also found on Galapagos Islands. There are 2 different types of iguanas on the Galapagos Islands. The sea iguana called Amblyrhynchus cristatus feeds on the moss found under the sea. As sea mosses contain abundant salt, the sea iguanas which consume them also have amounts of salt deposits on their bodies. Sea iguanas have a gland in their nose which separates the excess salt from their bodies. When sea iguanas exhale air fast through their nose like sneezing, the salt is eliminated through the nose. But the iguanas which consume cactus-like plants do not have glands in their nose like the sea iguanas. The iguanas found on Galapagos Islands are the descendants of green iguanas seen in the continent of South America, particularly in Central America. Researchers believe that the iguanas would have reached these islands along with huge branches of trees or plants which were floating for about 2 weeks in the sea. Unlike the mammals which maintain a constant body temperature, iguanas are incapable of maintaining a constant body temperature. Hence, iguanas change their temperature according to the atmospheric temperature. During winter season, when the body temperature of iguanas reduces, they are unable to function fast. During their periods, iguanas are preyed upon by other animals. It rained iguanas. For example, in the year 2008, during the month of January, iguanas kept falling from the trees found along the roadside in Florida in North America. It was because as the iguanas were totally frozen, they were unable to hold on to the branches of the trees. In the afternoon, when the heat of the sun increased, a few of the iguanas regained consciousness and climbed the trees. Most of the other iguanas were crushed under the wheels of vehicles that passed by. This incident was telecast as iguana rain by a local television channel. When such is the case, how could the iguanas have traveled day and night in the sea and reached these islands along with floating vegetation? Before diving into the sea to feed on the moss found in the sea, the iguanas living on Galapagos Islands lie down on the rocks found on the seashore up to the noon to increase their body temperature. Then they dive into the sea to feed on the moss and after consuming, once again lie down on the rocks to regain the lost temperature. Sometimes the iguanas lie closer together to keep themselves warm. It is noteworthy that during the night the iguanas burrow into the sand and keep themselves warm. The archaeologists who evaluated the rocks of the Galapagos Islands have found out that the rocks have been formed 4 million years ago. Based on their findings, the archaeologists have discovered that the Galapagos Islands have been formed only 4 million years ago. But according to the DNA testing, it has been found that iguanas evolved from a common ancestor before 20 million years. Hence, it is really puzzling to note that the iguanas living on Galapagos Island seem to be older than the island themselves. Researchers are of the opinion that long before their migration to Galapagos Islands, the iguanas living on Galapagos Islands could have lived on some other islands for millions of years. Researchers have stated that those islands would have sunk in the sea and might be rediscovered later. In the meantime, geologists have collected and tested rock samples from the volcanoes, which are found submerged at 6,500 feet below sea level in the sea between the continent of South America and Galapagos Islands. Researchers discovered that the rock samples collected from the volcanoes submerged at 6,500 feet below sea level, unlike the volcanic rocks above ground level, did not contain carbon in them. Based on their findings, researchers have found out that the volcanoes, which are found submerged at 6,500 feet below sea level in the sea now, have been volcanic islands above the ground level millions of years ago. Moreover, the researchers had seen marks of erosion on a rock near submerged volcano by sea waves and also pebbles. All these show that thousands of years ago, the level of sea had been 6,500 feet lower and those volcanoes had been islands above the sea level. Hence, it is proved that millions of years ago, when the level of sea between the continent of South America and Galapagos Island was thousands of feet lower along the land connection, iguanas had migrated from the South America to the Galapagos volcanic region. Like the iguanas, giant tortoises too have migrated from South America to the Galapagos volcanic region along the ground connection. Later, when the level of sea arose, Galapagos volcanoes came to be known as Galapagos Islands. Iguanas in the center of the Pacific Ocean. To state specifically, Fiji Island, which is at a distance of 8,000 kilometers away from South America, has two different species of iguanas, namely Brachylophus vitiensis and Brachylophus fasciatus. How were the iguanas able to cross a sea stretch of 8,000 kilometers? Researchers believe that these iguanas would have reached Galapagos Island, which is 1,000 kilometers away from the continent of South America, along with huge branches of trees or plants which were floating for about 2 weeks in the sea. When things stand thus, how the iguanas survived without food and water during the journey for a minimum of 16 weeks, that is, a little more than 1 year to Fiji Island, which is at a set distance of 8,000 kilometers away from South America in the center of the Pacific Ocean. Crossing 8 kilometers of sea on floating vegetation and branches of trees would take many months, but iguanas could not have traveled on floating vegetation and branches of trees for many months and reached Fiji Island from South America. Hence, the presence of iguanas on Fiji Island, which is at a distance of 8,000 kilometers from South America, in the center of the Pacific Ocean, clearly shows that thousands of years ago, the level of Pacific Ocean had been 10,000 feet lower than what it is at present. Just as the iguanas had migrated along the ground connection from the continent of South America to the Galapagos volcanic region, they also migrated along the mountains found above the Pacific Ocean from the continent of South America to Fiji Islands. Iguanas known as Coloradoan madagascariensis are found on Madagascar, which is situated 400 kilometers away from the continent of Africa. But it should be noted that iguanas are not found in the continent of Africa and Asia or the continent of Europe. Iguanas are found only in 5 places on the earth. They are South America Galapagos Islands, Caribbean Islands, Fiji Islands, and the island of Madagascar. How did the iguanas spread to these 5 places which have no connection with each other? The iguanas which have been sighted on the continent of South America are not only found on the Galapagos Islands on the eastern side of the Pacific Ocean, but also on Fiji Islands, which is in the center of the Pacific Ocean, and the island of Madagascar on the other side of South America and in Indian Ocean. The main reason for this is that millions of years ago, when the level of the sea was thousands of feet lower than it is at present, The central mountain range, which submerged at present at a depth of 6,000 feet, was continuous range above the sea level. When the central mountain range, which is submerged at present at a depth of 6,000 feet, was found continuous above the sea level thousands of years ago, the giant tortoises, iguanas, different species of lizards and mammals, including the foxes, had migrated from one place to another. Later, the sea had risen up. The frogs and lizards present on the different islands show that thousands of years ago, the level of Pacific Ocean had been thousands of feet lower than what it is at present. Lizards and frogs. As frogs live both on land and water, they are known as amphibians. But frogs mostly spend their lifetime near water bodies. The main reason for this is that the first life which originated in the sea had to undergo a lot of evolutionary changes. Frogs were breathing with the help of gills in the tadpole stage, but developed lungs in due course to lead a terrestrial life. But the reason for frogs to live near water bodies is that, unlike snakes and lizards, frogs' eggs are smooth and slimy and are laid in shallow waters. If these eggs were exposed to wind or sunlight for a long time, the water content in them will get evaporated and the embryo in the eggs will die. Similarly, the skin of the frog is very thin and moist, and so the frog always avoids windy and sunny places. Hence, frogs come out during rainy season and reproduce. The most important thing to be noted is that the frog cannot survive in sea water. It is because when the excess of salt from the sea water gets into its body, the frog will die. Under these circumstances, the reason for the presence of frogs on island is that 20 million years ago, the sea level was 2 kilometers lower than it is now. When compared to frogs, we can say that lizards are slightly advanced group of animals because they lay eggs which are protected by shells. Hence, there is no necessity for the eggs to be laid in the water or near water. So the reason for the wild lizards and garden lizards to live on many islands is that the sea level was 2 kilometers lower 20 millions of years ago. It is not possible to say that man would have taken them there, because on each island the wild lizards are of different kinds. Likewise, after millions of years, new species will evolve. Hence, as the lizards and frogs are different from each other, it clearly shows that before man could inhabit those islands, these animals have gone there. So, the reason for wild lizards and frogs, which cannot swim to live on many islands in the middle of the sea, is that the level was 2 kilometers lower 20 million years ago. How did field frogs cross the sea? After harvest in paddy fields, a species of frog, commonly called as rice frog and scientifically known as Limnonectes limchairs, are spotted. These frogs are not only found in the island of Sri Lanka and Indonesia, but also on the islands of Japan and Philippines. In the same way, a kind of lizard called arane in Tamil and scientifically known as Tilqua gigas with a blue tongue is found in Papua New Guinea, Guam, Aru and Bismarck Islands. Similarly, in the island continent of Australia, yellow-colored shell-less snail is found. This species of snail is also found in Papua New Guinea Islands, on the eastern side of New Zealand and on the southern side of island Macquarie. A researcher, T.W. Burton of Victoria University, has stated that the spreading of these snails from the continent of Australia to the nearby islands cannot be determined using the knowledge available at present. The extraordinary sea voyage of frogs. From the body of thin-skinned frogs, water will get easily evaporated. This will cause the death of the frog. To prevent this, the skin of frog will always be moist. In spite of this natural protection, the frog comes out only in the rainy season. It always lives in wet, shady areas and avoids too much of sun and windy places. To be specific, frogs will not move far away from water bodies. When it is so, Dr. Blair Hedges of Pennsylvania University has found out that through DNA test that frogs found in the Caribbean islands had their ancestors in the continent of South America. But these ancestors would have traveled from South America to Caribbean islands on sea plants, which was washed out into the sea by the force of rivers, and they would have had insects to eat and water to drink on the sea plant, says Hedges. But as the Atlantic Ocean's level was 10,000 feet lower, the frogs have traveled from South America to the Caribbean by land, through the connection that existed then. After the land rose, South America and Caribbean Sea also rose. The extraordinary journey of snails. In the continent of Europe, Balia snails, which have a very small nut-like shell, are found sticking to the trees. These snails are found on Azores, a volcanic island which is in the central region of North Atlantic Ocean, 1,500 kilometers away from the continent of Europe. Dr. Richard Breeze of Cambridge University says that these snails could have stuck on the legs of birds and reached the island. This explanation sounds extraordinary because birds are in the habit of cleaning themselves often. How could these snails have spread in both the islands? The same species of snails which are found on the northern hemisphere of the island, Azores, situated in between North America and Europe in North Atlantic Ocean, is also found on the volcanic island of Tristan da Cunha in the southern hemisphere between the continents, South America and South Africa in the central part of South Atlantic Ocean, which is 9,000 kilometers away from Azores. So, the explanation which states that these Balia snails would have stuck to the legs of birds and reached Azores becomes questionable. It is because the theory of Balia snails had moved from one island to another by following the same method of clinging to the legs of birds sounds unacceptable. Then how could these snails have spread in both the islands? To be specific, both these islands are the highest peaks of a mountain range which starts from the northern hemisphere and extends to the southern hemisphere below the sea and protrude above the surface of Atlantic Ocean. This undersea mountain range is 8,000 feet above the 16,000 feet deep sea bed of the Atlantic Ocean, but it is 6,000 feet below the sea level. As already known through different kinds of evidence, 20 million years ago when the sea was 10,000 feet lower than it is now, this underwater mountain range was 4,000 feet higher. So Balia snails found on Azores, a volcanic island which is in the central region of North Atlantic Ocean, traveled by land and reached the volcanic island of Tristan da Cunha in the central part of South Atlantic Ocean. After this, a sea level rose 10,000 feet. The mountain range which was above the sea level got submerged in the sea. So Balia snails did not cling to the legs of birds and reached the island by air. But in fact, 20 million years ago, they traveled on the Atlantic mountain range, which was above the sea level, and reached the island of Tristan da Cunha from the island of Azores. According to Wagner's theory of moving continents, it was believed that 150 million years ago, South America was detached from the continent of Africa, moved towards west and reached the position in which it is now situated. Researchers show that only 3 million years ago, the land of Panama appeared between North America and South America and united both these continents. Wagner's theory states that till then South America was an island continent. Recently, the jawbones of a monkey which lived 20 million years ago have been found in Andes mountain at South America. After examining the teeth, researchers have stated that this species of monkeys originated in Africa. At present, the DNA tests conducted on the monkeys living in South America also showed that their ancestors reached there from Africa. Researcher Diane Rowe of Massachusetts University said that even the rabbit-like animals living at present in America traveled on the Atlantic using floating plants and logs and reached here from Africa. The problem here is, researcher John Flynn of the Chicago City Museum states that the ancestors of these monkeys traveled on floating plants and logs 20 million years ago and crossed the 2,000 miles broad Atlantic Ocean and reached here. Moreover, we were under the impression that the Andes mountain originated 100 million years ago. The recently discovered bones have made us understand that it is originated later, and the theories about the formation of Andes have completely changed. But as the sea level was very low, there is a possibility that from Africa these monkeys could have reached South America by land. Moreover, the DNA tests conducted on monkeys found on Jamaica also revealed that they were from Africa. So it is clear that the sea level had been very low many million years ago. To sum up, the main reason for fossils of sea animals to be found on the land is that all the continents had been once below the sea and have later risen up. Similarly, the presence of earthworms and frogs, which have delicate bodies and cannot cross seas far off, isolated islands indicate that many thousands of years ago, the sea level had been many thousands of feet lower and has risen up now. Thousands of hot water springs continuously spurting out water mixed with the sea, and this resulted in rising of sea level. When the molten rock material inside the earth cools down slowly, hardens and gets converted into tectonic rocky plates, the steam which is released condenses and forms water, and this comes out from inside the earth through the hot water springs and keeps mixing with the sea water. As the hot gases and steam get released from the molten rock material inside the earth, the molten rock gives rise to less dense tectonic plates. Apart from that, the thickness of rocky plates also increases. When rocky plates of lesser density are formed from the molten rock materials of higher density, they float just like ice floating on water and move upwards. During their movement, their edges rub against each other, which results in earthquakes. Fossils of dinosaurs. Norwegian researchers discovered the fossils of dinosaurs from the rock that were unearthed while drilling an oil well under the sea using drilling machines. Morten Bergen and Johan Peter Newston, two geologists of Norway, discovered the fossils of dinosaurs which were 3 centimeters long from the rocky pieces which were unearthed while drilling into rocks at 2.3 kilometers depth under the sea and 140 kilometers on the western side away from the Norwegian seashore. Norwegian paleontologist Dr. John Harald Hurum of the Oslo University, who studied the fossils under a very powerful microscope, found out that the fossils belong to a species of dinosaurs called Plateosaurus, which lived in abundance in the continent of Europe 200 million years ago. To state specifically, the dinosaurs called Plateosaurus were huge gigantic animal of 4-ton weight which the capacity to grow 30 feet in length. Till then, the fossils of dinosaurs had been discovered only on the surface of the earth. Now, for the first time, the fossils of dinosaurs have been discovered in rocks under the sea, that too 2 kilometers below the sea level, which proves that during the time of dinosaurs, the sea level was 2 kilometers lower than it at present. Hence, the reason for the presence of fossils of dinosaurs on the 7 continents is that during the time of dinosaurs, the sea level was 2 kilometers lower than at present. But it is wrongly believed that originally all the 7 continents were fused together and later got detached, and they are still moving away from each other. And so, the bone fossils of dinosaurs are present on all the 7 continents. Earth is transforming into a water planet. The theory based on the evidence of fossils, which claims that the rise in the sea level is due to the melting of ice in the polar regions and the water flowing into the sea, is totally wrong. It has come to limelight that when the magma beneath the earth is cooled and gets solidified into rocks, the hot water that is separated from it gushes out through the hot springs and enters the oceans is the actual reason for the rise in the sea level. It has also been proved by the earthquake charts drawn on the areas where earthquakes occurred that during the period of dinosaurs, the sea level was not only 2 kilometers lower than it is now, but there was a land connection along with the forest between continents. Animals including dinosaurs migrated through these forests. Ocean floors and the continents were stationary. Earthquakes and tsunami were caused due to the eruption of volcanoes under the earth. In addition, it was discovered through the evidence of fossils that due to the continuous rise in the sea level and the increase in the ocean area, the atmosphere is cooling down, which has been the contributing factor for the formation of ice in the polar regions. Similarly, the evidence of fossils has also proved that during the period of dinosaurs, the sea level was low. The tilt in the axis of Earth had not taken place. Also in the polar regions, similar to the equatorial regions, hot temperate climate prevailed, which gave rise to evergreen forests. The island of Madagascar is situated at a distance of 400 kilometers from the African continent. Recently, the bone fossils of 3 types of dwarf hippos, namely Hippopotamus lamerlae, Hippopotamus madagascarensis, Hippopotamus lalmina, have been discovered. The dwarf hippo is an animal species which evolved in the African continent 20 million years ago. This species cannot swim or float on the surface of water. But the African continent and the island of Madagascar are separated by a sea with a depth of 2 kilometers. The discovery of the fossils of a dwarf hippo species, which could not either float nor swim, in the island of Madagascar, separated from the African continent by a sea region with a depth of 2 kilometers, categorically proves that 20 million years ago the sea level was 2 kilometers low. The water that separates from the magma underneath the earth comes out through the hot springs. There are innumerable hot springs under the ocean. It is estimated that the age of Earth is 4.5 billion years. The sea level has risen by 4 kilometers in 4.5 billion years. But the discovery of the fossils of dwarf hippos at Madagascar Island proves that within 20 million years, the sea level had risen by 2 kilometers. At present, the continents are at an average height of 2,000 feet above the sea level. In another 10 million years, the sea level will rise to the extent of 1 kilometer, that is 3,000 feet. When this happens, with the exception of Himalayas and similar rocky mountain ranges, all the continents will lie submerged under the sea. The fossil evidences go to prove that the Earth is slowly transforming into a water planet. No satisfactory explanations have been offered for the presence of animal species in Madagascar like lemur and tenrec, which evolved in the African continent some 60 million years ago. And also the fossils of dwarf species of hippos, Simosuchus, a three-fleet plant-eating crocodile, which also evolved in the African continent around 20 million years ago. The Simosuchus body and legs are covered by bone plates. Therefore, it cannot swim, and it is still a mystery how these animals reached the Madagascar islands. At this juncture, fossils of dinosaurs and trees have been discovered at a depth of 2 kilometers from the sea level. Hence, it is proved beyond doubt that during the period of dinosaurs, the sea level was 2 kilometers lower than it is today, and there was a land connection with thick forests between the continents and the islands. At the same time, Dr. Yoshida, an expert, collected and analyzed the water that gushed out of hot springs and discovered that it was the water that got separated from the magma found in the greater depths of the earth. There are innumerable hot springs similar to these under the ocean. So the sea level has risen only due to the mixing of the water in the sea that comes out through these hot springs under the earth. Hence, it has come to limelight that the explanation for the rising of sea level due to global warming and melting of polar ice is wrong. 6 months sea voyage of the blind snake in the Atlantic Ocean. Flatworms called planarians, which resemble earthworms, are found in all the 6 continents except the continent of Antarctica. Flatworms called planarians are said to be immortal. If a single planarian is cut vertically and horizontally into 100 pieces, within a week each piece will develop into a new planarian. But unlike earthworms, some species of planarians live in freshwater sources like ponds and tanks, specifically stating that earthworms like planarians also cannot live in seawater. When such is the case, how could a planarian spread from one continent to other continents? It is really puzzling to note that very rare species of earthworms which are not found anywhere are found in the volcanic island Crozet, which is near to the continent of Antarctica. Researchers are studying as to how blind snakes, which at a glance look like earthworms, spread all over the world. Blind snakes are capable of growing up to a length of 1 foot. But unlike earthworms, blind snakes have scales on their bodies. Though they are referred to as blind snakes, those blind snakes that live beneath dry leaves have tiny eyes that can feel light. 2 researchers, Blair Hedges and Nicholas Vidal, conducted a research to find out how the blind snakes spread from one continent to the other. First, they collected 96 varieties of blind snakes, and from them they took 5 kinds of DNA and did a comparative study. Based on their study, they proclaimed that 150 million years ago, blind snakes had evolved on Earth. Hence, the researchers explained that all the present continents were once together as a whole large continent was called Gondwana. And later it got split into different continents and they moved away from each other, due to which blind snakes were able to spread to all the continents. But the puzzle is yet to be solved. Previously, it was believed that the continent Gondwana got scattered 100 million years ago. but the bone fossil of a dinosaur named Abelisaurus had been found in South America, Africa, Madagascar Islands and India. So even though the continent Gondwana got scattered 100 million years ago, researchers had explained that till 65 million years ago there had been land connections between the different continents. As things stand thus, researcher Blair Hedges had found out through DNA testing that 63 million years ago, blind snakes that are found in Africa and South America had evolved from a common ancestor. So, Blair Hedges states that the blind snakes found in South America would have traveled from the continent of Africa after the continents got scattered and would have traveled on the floating sea flora for about 6 months in the Atlantic Ocean and reached the continent of South America. But blind snakes feed on small insects such as ants and termites. Hence, it is puzzling as to how blind snakes survived on floating flora on the sea for 6 months. But Blair Hedges says blind snakes survived on the insects found on the floating flora. The important thing to be noted here is that the floating flora could not have been together due to the movement of waves. So it would not have been possible to have sufficient insects for the blind snakes to consume for a period of 6 months. Hence, blind snakes could not have reached the continent of South America either due to the scattering of continents or due to 6 months of sea voyage. Instead, blind snakes must have traveled by land connection between South America and Africa when the sea was 10,000 feet lower and spread from the continent to continent. Moreover, according to Blair Hedges' study, it has been found out that the blind snakes found in the continent of Australia are believed to have evolved 20 million and 8 million years ago. Based on his findings, Blair Hedges states that blind snakes have reached the continent of Australia by sea journey. But the presence of blind snakes in the continent of Australia clearly shows that the sea level was 10,000 feet lower 20 million years ago and then has risen up now. Norwegian researchers discovered the fossils of dinosaurs from the rocks that were unearthed while drilling an oil well under the sea using drilling machines. Morten Bergen and Johan Peter Newston, two geologists of Norway, discovered the fossils of dinosaurs which were 3 centimeters long from the rocky pieces which were unearthed while drilling into rocks at 2.3 kilometers depth under the sea and 140 kilometers on the western side away from the Norwegian seashore. Norwegian paleontologist Dr. John Harald Hurum of the Oslo University, who studied fossils under a very powerful microscope, found out that the fossils belonged to a species of dinosaurs called Plateosaurus, which lived in abundance in the continent of Europe 200 million years ago. To state specifically, the dinosaurs called Plateosaurus were huge gigantic animals of 4 tons weight and with the capacity to grow 30 feet in length. Till then, the fossils of dinosaurs had been discovered only on the surface of Earth. Now, for the first time, the fossils of dinosaurs have been discovered in rocks under the sea, that too 2 kilometers below the sea level, which proves during the time of dinosaurs, the sea level was 2 kilometers lower than it at present. Hence, the reason for the presence of fossils of dinosaurs on all 7 continents is that during the time of dinosaurs, the sea level was 2 kilometers lower than at present. But it is wrongly believed that originally all the 7 continents were fused together and later got detached and they were still moving away from each other. And so, the bone fossils of dinosaurs are present on all 7 continents. This theory was believed that oceans were formed only due to falling down of millions of icy comets floating in the space. At this time, Dr. Yoshida, a geologist, analyzed the water that gushed out of hot springs in Japan and found out from the isotopes present in it that this water was actually separated from magma found in the greater depths of Earth. Similarly, countless number of hot springs has been discovered beneath the sea. Hence, oceans have formed only from water that gushed out through these hot springs for millions of years. At the same time, Norwegian and German geologists found the fossils of Plateosaurus, a dinosaur, which lived 200 million years ago in Europe, in the seafloor when drilled for oil, prospecting to the depth of 2 kilometers from the sea level. In the same manner, researchers have found the burnt parts of trees, seeds and pollen in the 90 million year volcanic rock taken from a submarine plateau in the Indian Ocean, which is submerged at the depth of 2 kilometers from the surface of the sea. Hence, it has been proved with evidence that the burnt part of trees, seeds and pollen in the 90-million-year-old rock fossils taken from an ocean floor under the Indian Ocean submerged at the depth of 2 kilometers from the surface of the sea. Hence, it has been proved with evidence that during the era of dinosaurs, the sea level was not only 2 kilometers low, but there was a land connection along with forests between continents. So, the reason for the presence of fossils of dinosaurs in the island continents like Antarctica is that the sea level during the era of dinosaurs was low to the extent of 2 kilometers compared to the present level, and also the existence of a land connection along with forests between these continents. But a wrong explanation is given for the presence of fossils of dinosaurs, even in the island continents like Antarctica, that once upon a time all the continents were connected and later they separated and started drifting apart. However, the geologists and zoologists who offer explanation about fossils on the basis of the continental drift theory were unable to explain. Rhipsalis is a genus of cactus family whose origin is South America, but the subspecies of Rhipsalis is found in South Africa. This plant spreads through seed dispersal, and definitely these seed dispersals cannot disperse 2,000 miles wide Atlantic Ocean. Therefore, how did the Rhipsalis disperse from South America to South Africa, which is a mystery unresolved till date in science? Some researchers speculated that the dispersal may have happened through plant-eating birds. These birds might have fed on these plants and crossed the Atlantic Ocean and excreted in Africa. But this is unusual and unnatural and hard to believe, because these birds would have taken several days to cross the Atlantic Ocean and did not excrete for these many days.